Chances are you learned the story of civil rights icon Rosa Parks back in elementary school. She became the mother of the civil rights movement after she refused to give up her seat to a white man on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, back in 1955. Parks's action inspired the Montgomery bus boycott, which led to the Supreme Court ruling that bus segregation was unconstitutional. It is a fairly well-known story. But 68 years later, Rosa Parks' story is being, shall we say, rewritten. The New York Times reports today that in an effort to get a social studies textbook approved for use in the state of Florida, at least one publisher has made significant changes to Rosa Parks' story. The New York Times compared three versions of the company's Rosa Parks story meant for first graders: a current lesson used now in Florida, an initial version created for the state textbook review, and a second updated version. In the current lesson on Rosa Parks, racial segregation is clearly explained. Quote, the law said African Americans had to give up their seats on the bus if a white person wanted to sit down. In a second version created for the Florida textbook review, race is mentioned indirectly. Quote, she was told to move to a different seat because of the color of her skin. And the reference to white people is gone. And in the third, updated version, race isn't mentioned at all. Quote, she was told to move to a different seat. She did not. Who knows why Rosa Parks was told to move? Could have been anything. According to the New York Times, the particular textbook is no longer under consideration by the state. When the Times asked the Florida Department of Education about that, they suggested that Studies Weekly, the publisher in question, had gone too far. But the publisher said it was simply trying to follow Florida's standards, namely the Stop Woke Act. The Stop Woke Act basically bans the teaching of any lesson, especially ones about race and racism, that make any student feel discomfort, which could be anything that suggests systemic racism exists or existed, because who knows how that would make students feel, especially white students. The Stop Woke Act is currently in effect from kindergarten through 12th grade in Florida's public schools, but it has been halted in colleges and universities due to multiple legal challenges. And on that front, we have news. Today, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that while those challenges are working their way through the courts, Florida cannot enforce the Stop Woke Act in colleges and universities. Joining us now is Florida State Representative Anna Eskamani. Representative Eskamani, thank you for joining us. I know you've been involved in a lot of these battles to basically stop what the governor and his allies are trying to do to Florida education. How are you reading this victory in court today? Though it is not permanent, it is a temporary victory of sort, but do you think it portends anything as far as a larger battle?
Well, first of all, Alex, thanks so much for having me. And it's a big victory for us, especially since right now we have House Bill 999, which is a huge takeover of higher education in Florida, canceling certain majors and minors, including women and gender studies, which I studied at the University of Central Florida. It goes after tenure, it changes general education courses, and it cancels DEI and CRT. And much of this bill's focus comes out of that anti-woke act, HB 7. So the fact that we have this temporary victory in court, it does speak to the thrust of House Bill 999 and how that is also going to be unconstitutional.
I just wonder, and I think certainly the battle in and around these issues in higher ed seems to have gotten more traction in terms of pushing back than what's happening in K through 12, right? These textbooks, this is what is actively happening. This isn't theoretical. These are publishers changing their textbooks for reasons that remain sort of unclear at this juncture. But it seems like it's an effort to comply with a vague law that has a deeply chilling effect on any discussion about race or racism, even if it happened 60 years ago. Do you have the sense that, I mean, we know of this one example of this publisher doing this. Do you have the sense that other textbook publishers may have been doing the same thing?
Well, not just publishers. I mean, we're seeing corporations eliminate their DI programs, even though they don't need to. We see school boards expanding the Don't Say Gay Trans bill even though they don't need to. So there is this almost proactive coercion happening because so many of these entities, whether it's public, private, nonprofit, they're acting in a place of fear. So if they serve LGBTQ plus people, they don't want to talk about it anymore. If they embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion, they're going to call it something else. We're seeing this just censorship go over the entire state of Florida, even when it's not in law. It's almost like they feel this pressure and this force from Governor DeSantis to do that. In the case of publishers, these are billion-dollar deals, and oftentimes the largest states dictate the curriculum in other states. And so I assume it's a profit motive for some of these publishers, but I also would urge corporations not give in to this fascist agenda. Don't erase history to appease one man. It's so important the next generation know our history so that we don't repeat it.
When you talk about who is pushing the agenda, certainly the Stop Woke Act is very much something that the governor likes to tout as an achievement of his administration. But there are groups that are working hand in glove with his administration to execute this agenda. And I think it's important that we sort of call attention to the reporting on that. The Florida Citizens Alliance, this is from the New York Times reporting today, a conservative group has urged the state to reject 28 of the 38 textbooks that its volunteers reviewed, including more than a dozen by McGraw-Hill, a major national publisher. These are the kind of objections this group has. An 8th grade book gave outsized attention to the negative side of the treatment of Native Americans, while failing to give a fuller account of their own acts of violence, such as the Jamestown Massacre of 1622, in which Powhatan warriors killed more than 300 English colonists. I mean, who knows what they'll say about slave insurrections and whether we've put too much onus on slaveholders. I mean, the asymmetry here is quite obvious when we're talking about the genocide of the native peoples in this country. But this seems to be working. I mean, these folks, the Florida Citizens Alliance, seem to have an outsized role in determining what children can learn. Is there a counter movement on the progressive side that is working to push back?
Well, first of all, this is a very good point. Governor Ron DeSantis has surrounded himself with extremists, whether it's this organization or Moms for Liberty or think tanks from other states that have come to Florida. He has surrounded himself with some of the worst characters and people who do not have the best interest of every child in mind. But to answer your question, we do have organizations like the Florida Freedom to Read Project and so many others that have really erupted as counter, and also just everyday people. We're seeing more engagement from young people, students staging walkouts on their college campuses. The hearing we had on House Bill 999 this week, 220 people came out to testify against that bill here in Tallahassee, to the point where the Senate actually amended their version to adjust to some of the points that people made in the House. So this backlash is happening from everyday people, but we have to maintain it, not just through legislative session, but also to the next election cycle. So we can make sure that we elect people who have everyone's best interests in mind, not just a few elite, not just their own political agenda.
I got to ask you, it seems like the fear is the point in all of this, right? Even if there are challenges, the idea that these laws exist, that they've been proposed or passed by the legislature, seems to almost be the point, in the same way that, the conservatives are trying to throw fear into the mix when it comes to abortion and access to abortion or abortion medication. The entire point is to terrify people enough to make choices that aren't good for them, or to actually prevent them from seeking out the truth. And I wonder if that strategy is working, or whether you think the national attention is having its due effect.
Well, this is why I always reference how every culture war is also a class war. Because to your point, when you scare people from learning about their history, from learning the stories of their ancestors, from seeking gender-affirming care, or making the right decision for their future by ending a pregnancy, when you scare them from making those decisions, you're also deciding what their economic stability looks like, whether they're going to be able to have enough money to make ends meet, to access the care they need to live an authentic life, to have higher education to be free thinkers. So much of this is also tied to just separating the haves and have-nots and making it harder for those of us where access is not always clear cut to really reach our fullest potential. So we have to look at this not just from a culture lens, but also from an economic and class struggle lens to ensure that we're lifting up every person and overcoming these barriers, which really are designed to just be cruel for the sake of being cruel and to punish people who already struggle with different systematic barriers.
Yeah,
and so I tell folks all the time, this is not about winning every battle, it's about winning the war.
Yeah, it's notable that we're talking about the public school system here that conservatives have focused on. Florida State Representative Anna Eskamani, thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you.